Hi everyone. This module I'm going to continue with the Prime Minister, the functions of the powers and functions of the cabinet. Okay, I'm continuing with the Union Executive. So this module is on the Union Executive and we are going to continue from where we left off last. We have completed the cabinet formation, appointment, terms of office, etc. And I told you that I will be doing the powers and functions of the cabinet. Please take out your textbooks. If you haven't got it, pause the video and go and get your textbook. So let's continue. We begin with the powers and functions of the cabinet. The administrative powers. Okay, what are the administrative powers? The first one, policy making. The cabinet formulates both external and domestic policies of the government. Please keep your pens or pencils ready so that you can mark. So the cabinet formulates both external and domestic policies of the government. It takes decisions on matters such as defense, economic policy, security needs, president's rule in the state, and formation of new states. So you can just mark the examples over there with such as, from there up to the word states. So if you are writing about policy making, you can write just this much. It gives a complete explanation. Okay, then individual ministers have reasonable freedom of action, but on all major matters they have to consult the cabinet. So the cabinet is very important. Okay, we are doing the powers and functions of the cabinet. Then we come to the next one, which is the implementation of policies. Once a policy decision is taken by the cabinet on any subject, it is conveyed to the ministers of state and to the deputy ministers of the concerned ministry. Once that decision is conveyed to them, it is a job of the deputy ministers of that ministry and the ministers of the state to carry out that particular decision and to inform the staff and to make sure that the decision is carried out in the way that the cabinet has passed it. Did you all understand? So implementation of policies. First one is policy making. The cabinet makes the policies. After making the policies, what will it do? It will convey the policy that has been passed by it to the ministers of state and the deputy ministers. Okay. So let's write. Once a policy decision is taken by the cabinet on any subject, it is conveyed to the minister of state and the deputy minister of the concerned ministry. They work out the details, that is point number 2. They work out the details and pass it to the civil servants under that ministry to implement the decision. Okay. Then point number 3. The business of the government is managed jointly by the council of ministers and the civil servants concerned. Okay. Then we come to the coordinating and functioning of the various ministries. So it is a cabinet, the cabinet who will coordinate the working of the various departments for the smooth implementation of the government policies. So that is the job of the cabinet, to ensure that everybody functions smoothly and everybody functions together. Okay. Then appointments. All major appointments, though made by the president, are decided upon by the cabinet. Please mark that. All major appointments, though made by the president, but they are decided by the cabinet. So the cabinet approves the appointment of particular people and conveys it to the prime minister. The prime minister will convey it to the president and then the president will appoint them. Okay. So, all major appointments, though made by the president, are decided upon by the cabinet. Such appointments, now which are these appointments? Examples. Appointments of judges of the Supreme Court, High Court, governors of state, chief election commissioner and the other dignitaries, and even our ambassadors to other nations. All these are appointed, decided by the cabinet, conveyed to the prime minister, and the prime minister will convey it to the president. Okay, so that much for the administrative power. Now we come to the legislative powers. Introduction of bills. The cabinet and the departments of administration take the initiative in legislation. In fact, the cabinet initiates most of the bills. I want you to mark from here. The legislative proposals that the cabinet formulates are called as official bills. These bills are given priority and preference over private bills. You remember what is a private bill? Something which is proposed by a parliament member, but he may or may not be a minister. Okay, those are private bills. Formulation of so if the cabinet has proposed a particular bill, then that will get precedence over the private members' bills. Okay, so you mark that. So from legislative up to bills, formulation of these bills involves not only preparing the draft of the proposals but also presenting them before the parliament for approval. The cabinet explains the merits of the bills. We have seen this in detail when we have done how a bill becomes a law. I have explained this entire thing to you earlier, okay, in one of my earlier modules. If you go through it, you'll come to know. Now mark this. It is a cabinet who pilots the bill through various processes of legislation from introduction to the final passage of the bill. Mark it. Then we come to the source of information. The ministers answer the questions put to them. That next line you can cancel out when you are writing your answer. The ministers answer the questions put to them by the members of the Lok Sabha and thus provide information to the public through their representatives. So they have to answer their questions. They have to give information to those ministers who pose a question to them so that they can tell that in their constituency. Now, amendment of the constitution. The cabinet is instrumental in planning and moving the amendment to the constitution. So the cabinet also does the job of cabinet is important and instrumental in planning and moving the amendment to the constitution. That is also done by the cabinet. Then we come to the next point, summoning the houses of the parliament. Although the houses are summoned by the president, the initiative in this matter is taken by the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs. So whenever the houses have to be summoned by the president, the initiative is basically taken by the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs. Then we come to the next point, President's special address. We have discussed this earlier, that when the new Lok Sabha meets for the first time, the president gives an address. So he or she addresses the houses first. Okay, so the president's special address is called as. The cabinet prepares the president's special address to the parliament. The cabinet thus sets forth its legislative program to the commencement of the first session of the Lok Sabha after each general election and the commencement of the first session of the parliament for each year when the president addresses them. Then the next one is issuing ordinances. The cabinet also advises the president to issue ordinances when the parliament is not in session. Okay, then we come to it's easy, you have understood now, that if the parliament is not sitting in session, remember there is a gap between the sessions of the parliament. So when the parliament is we have got 3 sessions in India. Okay, so when the parliament is not sitting in session and supposing something urgently has to be done, then what happens? The president gives out an ordinance and that ordinance has the value of a law. Okay, till it has to be ratified by the parliament. But it is not that the president suddenly gets up one day in the morning and decides कि चलो I want to give an ordinance. ऐसे नहीं होता है. The cabinet has to agree to it and the cabinet advises the president to give an ordinance. Okay, so financial powers. Now we come to the financial powers, the budget. The finance minister, please mark, the finance minister prepares the annual budget containing estimates of income and expenditure for the ensuing year. These are estimates that they have estimated that there is going to be so much cost involved in different departments. Okay, close the bracket. Then you come to the next line, any amendment, open a bracket, any amendment to the budget proposals against the wishes of the cabinet that is passed by the Lok Sabha shows that it amounts to a vote of no confidence in the ministry. That means if the finance ministry has formulated a budget and the Lok Sabha decides to amend it, not listening to the finance ministry, it means that the Lok Sabha is not happy with them. It amounts to a no confidence vote and then that ministry has to resign. Okay, so this cannot happen. Any amendment to the budget proposals against the wishes of the cabinet that may be passed by the Lok Sabha amounts to a vote of no confidence in the ministry. In such a situation, the ministry must resign. Okay. Then we come finances to the government. The cabinet is responsible for the expenditure of the government, for presenting the demand of grants, and also for raising the necessary income by various means such as taxation. So they have to generate money also. No, if they don't generate money, then how are they going to function? Okay. Then introduction of money bills. A money bill can be introduced only in the Lok Sabha. Emergency powers. The President cannot declare a proclamation of general emergency under Article 352 of the Constitution without receiving in writing the permission of the Cabinet. Okay, to this effect. Similarly, the questions of proclamation of financial emergency and the President's rule in a state are also decided by the Cabinet. So the Cabinet has a very important role to play. Please remember all this. So we've done the functions, the power and the functions of the Cabinet. Now we come to the positions and powers of the Prime Minister. What are his position? What is his position in the executive, and what are the powers that the Prime Minister has? While the President is the nominal head of the state with the backing of a majority in the Lok Sabha, the Prime Minister is the real head of the nation because he has the backing of the Lok Sabha, and it is a Lok Sabha who has been elected by the people, isn't it? So it is the people who have elected the members of the Lok Sabha, and the Lok Sabha, the winning party has elected their leader, who is the Prime Minister. Therefore, even though the President is the head of the state, he is a nominal head and the actual power lies in the hands of the Prime Minister. But in a parliamentary democracy, his or her deeds are closely judged not only by the opposition but also by the members of his or her own party. Means if the Prime Minister, just because he is the head of or he has been elected as the leader of the majority of the party, it doesn't mean, or it doesn't give him the authority to act in an arbitrary manner, because every action of the Prime Minister is judged by whom? Not only by the opposition, but even his own party members will judge his actions. So the Prime Minister has to tread very carefully. Okay. If he or she tries to assume dictatorial tendencies, he or she cannot escape the loss of the confidence of the Parliament during his or her tenure, as well as that of the electorate in the following general elections. Because the people may not say anything at that time, but when the general elections come, they will show. Thus, he or she is the head of the government and is answerable to the people of the country. Who is answerable? The Prime Minister. Now we come to the powers of the Prime Minister and the President vis-a-vis, side by side. Okay. So have you all understood this? We call the President as the nominal head and the Prime Minister as the real head. But there is a control. Okay. Now we consider both of them simultaneously. The Prime Minister and the President. All the authority vested in the President is exercised by the Prime Minister. He or she is the principal advisor to the President. Thus, the President is the nominal head and the Prime Minister is the real executive of the Indian Union. Okay, you understood this. So all the powers are basically vested in the President, but the powers are exercised by the Prime Minister. Because why? Because he is the principal advisor. He advises the President on all the matters, and the President listens to the Prime Minister very carefully. Okay. It is on the advice of the Prime Minister that the President summons and prorogues the Parliament and dissolves the Lok Sabha. So you know now what is proroguing means, to dissolve the entire house. Okay. And he calls, the President summons means calls for, and he also dissolves the Lok Sabha and prorogues the house, the Parliament. The Prime Minister chooses this. I have explained this in detail in my earlier modules when I was doing the Union Executive. What is the meaning of prorogues? Please go through those modules if you haven't understood it properly. Okay. The Prime Minister chooses the ministers, and on his or her advice, the President will appoint them. So the Prime Minister makes his choice, and then once his choice is made, they are appointed by the President. The ministers may be dismissed on the advice of the Prime Minister. So the Prime Minister is the person who actually chooses the ministers, and at the same time the Prime Minister is the person who dismisses the ministers. Okay, it is all done on the advice of the Prime Minister by the President. Then he or she advises the President on various appointments of important posts, such as the judges of the Supreme Court and the governors and the ambassadors. So the judges of the Supreme Court, the governors of the state, the ambassadors of our country, all of these are appointed by the President on the recommendation or the choice of the Prime Minister, the advice of the Prime Minister, because the Prime Minister is the principal advisor to the President. Then next, he or she is a link between the President and the Council of Ministers. So it is the Prime Minister who is the link between whatever is decided by the Council of Ministers. That decision is conveyed to the Prime Minister, rather he knows about it because he is present. So ऐसा नहीं है कि पूरा Council of Ministers भागेगा President के पास, okay हम लोग ने ये decision किया, नहीं. What happens is, once a decision is made by the Council of Ministers, and you know what is a Council of Ministers, it includes everybody. It includes the cabinet ministers, the deputy ministers and the ministers of state. So once a decision is made by the Council of Ministers, that decision is conveyed to the President by the Prime Minister. So the Prime Minister ultimately has everything in his hand. Okay, so he is the link between the two of them. So he or she is a link between the President and the Council of Ministers. Our Constitution lays down that it shall be the duty of the Prime Minister to communicate to the President all the decisions of the Council of Ministers relating to the administration of the Union and the proposals of the legislation. So everything, it is a duty of the Prime Minister to convey it to the President. Okay, the President can ask the Council of Ministers to reconsider any matter. So if the President feels that something is not proper, it can tell the Council of Ministers that please reconsider what you all have proposed. Is it the right thing or not? Okay. Reconsider any matter which has not been considered by the cabinet and on which a decision has been taken by a minister. The President may call for information regarding the affairs of the Union, and the Prime Minister has to furnish such information. So if the President feels that this information which the Prime Minister is giving him or her is not sufficient, the President can ask the Prime Minister that I want this information, because the President has to think, because ultimately the appointment is done by the President. So it is not that the President acts without any brain or something. The President uses his or her brain, and if he or she is not satisfied with the information given by the Prime Minister, he or she has got a right to ask the Prime Minister to furnish more information, and it is a duty of the Prime Minister to inform the President that okay, this is the information, and then the President will decide. Okay, so it is, even though the President is a nominal head, the President can exercise his or her own discretionary power. Okay, so with that, I'm going to stop at this module over here. We have done today the powers and functions of the cabinet, and we have done the position and power of the Prime Minister, and we have done the Prime Minister and the President. Of course, now children, learning this could be a little difficult. So as usual, but that what I've been doing lately in this Union Executive, I have come up with my own acronyms, which you may or may not accept, because these are advisory functions. They are not compulsion. Okay. So I have taken this note for you all. Take a screenshot or copy it. I hope you all can see the full thing. Yes, it can be seen. Okay, so we'll quickly go through my notes. I'll explain to you what exactly I mean by it. Okay, powers and functions of the cabinet. Now see, there are 4 kinds of powers. If you want, you can keep your textbook open so you can compare, or you can compare it later on. There are basically 4 powers and functions of the cabinet. Which are they? Administrative, legislative, financial, emergency. Now, how will you remember administrative? Remember a cap. Okay, a cap with double P. Okay, so a cap, A stands for administrative. So what are the administrative powers and functions of the cabinet? A cap. Okay, now I've written it ulta. Okay, see, P stands for policy making, then policy implementation, appointment of governors, judges, etc., and coordinating. Okay, all this comes in administrative. If you see, we have these points given to you in the textbook. Okay, so you all can go through that. We have just read it and we've marked everything. Same way, now we come to the legislative powers. For legislative powers, I've written L. L is for legislative. So I've said like. Okay, so legislative like. So like a sip. Like if you're offering something to your friend, if you're drinking something and your friend is standing in front of you, like a sip. Do you want a sip? So remember that. Okay, so like a sip. And I is raised to 3. So I is raised to 3. Okay, so L stands for legislative. Just like A stands for administrative, L stands for legislative. So legislative powers of the cabinet are what? A sip. A sip. So I raised to 3. So first one, A stands for amendment of the constitution. S stands for summoning of the houses of the parliament, summoning and proroguing houses of the parliament. Then there are 3 I's. Okay, and what are these 3 I's? First one is issuing ordinances, introducing bills, and information source. It is a source of information. That's why I said I raised to 3. Okay, then we come to the last one, P. So that is President's special address. That is also done by the cabinet. So I hope it's easy for you all to remember. And then financial is very easy. Finance is to the government, then the budget, and then about the money bills. And then emergency, the cabinet must consent to everything in writing before there is a proclamation of any kind of emergency. Which are the different kinds of emergencies we have seen in the module previous to this. So you all can go through that. Okay. Now I come to the Prime Minister and the President. Now how will you remember the Prime Minister and the President side by side? How do you remember? Remember this sentence. Apply some common good link. Just remember this sentence. When you want to talk about the Prime Minister and the President side by side, vis-a-vis, what will you say? Apply some common good link. Now, A stands for advisor. So the Prime Minister is the principal advisor to the press. S stands for summoning and proroguing the parliament. C, that is common. C stands for choice of ministers is done by the Prime Minister, but they are appointed by the press on the advice of the Prime Minister. G stands for governors, judges of the Supreme Court and ambassadors. All these are appointed by the President on the advice of the Prime Minister. So the governors. Then the last one is link. The full word I've given you, link, that the Prime Minister is a link between the President and the Council of Ministers. So apply some common good sense. Then you will know President and Prime Minister. Okay, so that's the way we remember. You can form your own acronyms if you want. Otherwise, these are my acronyms. So I have tried to make it as easy as possible because, basically children, history is a lot of, history-civics is just learning. You don't have to apply your mind as such because you're just stating the facts. Like I always tell you in all my modules, it is just a clear, simple statement of facts. You cannot interpret it in the way you want. You cannot give your opinion. You cannot appreciate. You cannot criticize. You can't do anything. You have to just give the facts. Okay, so is that clear? So whenever I give you acronyms, please remember that these are the acronyms which suit me and my brain. If you have different acronyms, you're welcome to use them. And if you don't have the time to think about all that, use mine. That's simple. So with that, we come to an end of this chapter. And then now we'll be continuing with the powers and functions of the Prime Minister. I have done Prime Minister and President. So now we'll be doing Prime Minister and Cabinet. Okay. And how we check the authority of the Prime Minister. All that we are going to do in my next module. So see you all then. Here's your History-Civics facilitator for the ICSE exam 2027. Wishing you all a goodbye and happy learning. Bye everyone.